They laughed when you spoke your truth, smiled, whispered, rolled their eyes like confidence was a costume you'd eventually outgrow. But time has a funny sense of humor. Now the room feels smaller, the air heavier, because reality just walked in wearing your face. And the look on them? That's not anger, that's humiliation, the kind that burns quietly, knowing every word you said was real, and every doubt they had just exposed them. They wanted noise, applause, validation. They wanted you to beg the room to believe you, to explain yourself, to perform confidence like a circus act so they could decide if you deserved it. Funny thing is, truth never waits for permission. It doesn't knock. It doesn't campaign. It just exists quietly, patiently, watching everyone trip over their own assumptions. You spoke what you knew, not what sounded impressive. And that made them uncomfortable, because silence backed by certainty is terrifying to people who survive on approval. They mistook your calm for weakness, your restraint for insecurity. You weren't loud enough, flashy enough, dramatic enough for their expectations. So they laughed. Not because you were wrong, but because it was easier than questioning themselves. They needed applause to feel powerful, needed eyes on them, needed constant reassurance that they mattered. You didn't. You walked with something heavier than confidence. You walked with truth. And truth doesn't clap for itself. While they were busy performing for the crowd, you were building something in the shadows. No announcements. No hype. No speeches designed to impress. Just consistency, repetition, discipline. Truth grows in silence. It doesn't rush to prove itself. It lets time do the dirty work. Every day you didn't explain yourself chipped away at their certainty. Every time you stayed quiet, their jokes got louder, because laughter is a shield when doubt starts creeping in. They kept waiting for you to fail publicly, dramatically, so they could say, "See, we were right." But failure never showed up the way they scripted it. Instead, results did. Quiet ones, subtle ones at first, the kind you don't notice unless you're paying attention. And they weren't paying attention because they were too busy listening for applause. By the time they looked up, the balance had shifted. You didn't announce your arrival. You were already there. Truth doesn't argue. It doesn't debate. It doesn't defend itself in comment sections or closed rooms. It lets reality speak. And reality has a cruel sense of timing. It waits until everyone is comfortable in their disbelief before pulling the rug. That's when the silence hits them. The room changes. The laughter dies halfway through. The same people who dismissed you start avoiding eye contact, because admitting they were wrong would mean confronting their own smallness. You see, applause is temporary. It fades as fast as it starts. Truth stays. It lingers. It follows people home. It keeps them awake at night, replaying moments they wish they'd handled differently. They remember the way you stood there, unbothered, unshaken, not trying to convince anyone. That memory eats at them, because it proves something they hate to admit. You never needed them to believe you. They measured power by noise. You measured it by control. They thought influence came from being seen. You understood it comes from being undeniable. And now they're trapped with the realization that while they were clapping for each other, you were becoming exactly who you said you were. No applause. No permission. No validation. That's the part that humiliates them. Not your success. Not your growth. But the fact that you were right without asking for approval. That you trusted yourself when no one else did. That you let them laugh because you knew laughter is cheap and truth is expensive. And now the bill has arrived, and the room is painfully quiet, and every echo reminds them that truth never needed their applause to become real. They doubted first. Always do. Doubt is their reflex, their defense mechanism. When something doesn't fit the story they've already written in their heads, they poke holes in it, laugh at it, shrink it down to a joke so they don't have to deal with the possibility that they might be wrong. And you were easy to doubt at the start, not because you lacked substance, but because you didn't look like the version of success they were comfortable with. You didn't arrive with trophies in your hands or headlines screaming your name. You arrived with intent, and intent makes people nervous. They spoke louder as their doubt grew. Opinions multiplied. Advice nobody asked for. Side comments disguised as concern. They called it realism, called it honesty, called it just looking out for you. But it was fear wearing a friendly mask. Fear that if you actually pulled it off, their excuses would collapse. So they watched closely, waiting for cracks. Every small mistake became evidence. Every pause became proof. Doubt feeds on impatience, and they were starving for quick failure. You noticed it, of course. The looks, the tone shifts, the subtle smirks when you weren't in the room. But instead of reacting, you did something that confused them. You kept working. No announcements. No arguments. No emotional outbursts to confirm their narrative. You let doubt talk to itself. That silence bothered them more than any confrontation ever could, because silence doesn't give them anything to twist. Results don't rush. They stack. Slowly, quietly, like pressure building behind a wall. At first, the changes were small enough to ignore. A win here, a breakthrough there. Nothing dramatic, nothing viral. So they dismissed it, said it was luck, said it wouldn't last. Doubt always clings to explanations that protect the ego. But the pattern kept repeating. Consistency has a way of making excuses sound ridiculous. That's when the noise started to change. The confident doubt turned into cautious commentary. The jokes lost their punch. The certainty in their voices cracked just enough to be noticeable. They were still talking, but not with the same conviction. Doubt was losing ground, and they felt it. When results appear, doubt doesn't disappear immediately. It panics first. It scrambles for new angles, new criticisms, new ways to stay alive. You didn't acknowledge the shift. You didn't slow down to enjoy it. You didn't look back to check who was watching. You stayed locked in because you understood something they didn't. Results don't need witnesses to be real. They only need to exist. And existence changes everything. The room started adjusting itself around you without you saying a word. Eventually, the talking stopped. Not all at once. One voice at a time. Doubt can't survive in the presence of undeniable proof. It suffocates. It has nowhere to stand. The same people who questioned you now watched quietly, measuring their words, recalculating their stance. Silence replaced skepticism. Not respect yet, just silence. And silence is honest. That silence carries weight. It's heavy with unspoken admissions. Every quiet moment is an acknowledgement they'll never verbalize. They won't apologize. They won't admit they were wrong. Instead, they'll go quiet and hope the memory fades. But it won't. Because every result you produce reinforces the truth they tried to laugh away. Doubt had a voice once. Results took it. And now the only sound left is the echo of everything they said when they thought you'd never prove them wrong. Recognition doesn't arrive on time. It doesn't RSVP. It doesn't knock politely or send a warning. People think it's immediate, like applause after a joke or a cheer after a trick. But real recognition, the kind that rattles rooms and shifts dynamics, the kind that makes people squirm in their seats, that kind is patient. It waits until you've done the work, endured the doubts, ignored the smirks, and built something undeniable. Then it appears, not as a gift, not as a reward, but as a consequence of consistency, persistence, and audacity. They won't recognize you while you're climbing. No, they'll comment on the noise you make, the mistakes they anticipate, the ways you fail to fit into the narrative they've constructed for you. They want the story to match their comfort. They need it to fit into boxes that make them feel safe. You disrupt that. You defy their timeline. You show up in ways they didn't expect, wearing competence like a mask they can't remove, a mask they never saw coming. And they don't like it. People rarely do. Recognition is cruel. It doesn't come to comfort the doubters. It comes to humiliate them. It doesn't arrive in applause. It arrives in the subtle shift of attention. The moment people stop talking over you. The tiny pause when they realize, with a sinking feeling, that what you said was true all along. The realization hits them slowly at first. They notice results. They see influence. They hear stories about you from places you weren't even aware of. And that's when panic creeps in. Not for you. For them. For the ego that demanded to be first in line to believe, to judge, to control. Recognition is louder than any argument. It doesn't need justification. It doesn't need your explanations. All those voices that mocked, questioned, and doubted suddenly grow quiet because they can no longer be heard over the sound of facts proving themselves. You don't stand and announce your worth. It announces itself. Every subtle success, every calculated move, every quiet moment of preparation builds a crescendo that drowns out their disbelief. And the irony. They were the ones who underestimated it. They were the ones who doubted it. They were the ones who laughed while you worked. People resist recognition for others. It's a bitter thing to admit when someone else proves themselves. They wanted to see failure. They wanted to witness a stumble, a misstep, a slip. But you refused to deliver. You persisted when they expected collapse. You moved forward while they were busy measuring, criticizing, and scheming. And that's the moment recognition starts to become visible. Not as a celebration of you, but as a subtle, undeniable confirmation that they misjudged the entire scenario. They misjudged you. And misjudgment is a heavy, uncomfortable thing to carry. Recognition has no timetable. It has no sympathy. It has no loyalty. It's not a favor, a gift, or a reward. It's the evidence of reality catching up. And reality has a way of humiliating those who cling too tightly to doubt and arrogance. One day, the very people who whispered, mocked, and laughed at your ambition will stop whispering. They will stop laughing. They will pause just long enough to acknowledge, silently, that you were right, that they were wrong. That influence doesn't beg. That impact doesn't request approval. That dominance isn't about noise, it's about presence. Recognition doesn't arrive politely. It doesn't come in the form of validation letters or approval stamps. It arrives in the shift of attention, the quiet nods from unexpected corners, the subtle but unmistakable acknowledgement that everything they counted against you was irrelevant because you were already becoming what you claimed to be. And watching that unfold is a quiet, methodical humiliation for anyone who ever doubted you, because it proves that your trajectory was never theirs to judge. They underestimated you. They always do. People are wired to measure power by appearances, by volume, by how quickly someone bows to pressure. They look for signs they can quantify. Loud words, flashy moves, desperate displays. And when they don't see them, they assume weakness. That's their mistake. Influence isn't loud. Dominance isn't a performance. Power doesn't ask for attention. It demands it quietly, inevitably, like gravity, like time, like consequences that no one can avoid. They tried to contain you in their boxes, shape you into someone comfortable, someone small enough for them to feel superior. They whispered. They judged. They smiled behind their hands. They assumed that, because you weren't acting the part they expected, you weren't playing the game at all. That's where they were wrong. You weren't playing their game. You were building your own. And it was one they couldn't cheat, couldn't manipulate, couldn't invade without consequence. They laughed at your plans, at your confidence, at your timing, not because they were clever, but because they were afraid. Fear hides behind mockery. Every joke, every smirk, every sideways glance, they were panicked, scrambling for evidence that you were anything less than what you said you were. But evidence is tricky. It doesn't appear on demand. It comes quietly, invisibly, and it hits hardest when no one is looking. And that's exactly what happened. You didn't need to announce yourself. You didn't need to argue. You didn't need to prove anything in the moment, because dominance isn't an argument. It's a state of being. Every small success, every decision made without hesitation, every step taken with intention, built something unstoppable. They were too busy monitoring you, too focused on imagining your failure, to notice the foundation you were laying. And by the time it became visible, it was already too late for them to interfere. The panic they feel now is deliciously quiet. It's the look in their eyes when they realize they miscalculated. It's the subtle shift in tone when they can no longer dismiss your presence. It's the sudden awareness that the person they wrote off, the person they laughed at, the person they assumed would falter, has been moving forward, unbothered, unstoppable, undeniable. And every glance, every whispered conversation, every half smile carries the weight of humiliation because they see, finally, that they were wrong. They thought dominance could be measured by comparison, by intimidation, by controlling the narrative. But dominance is a different beast. It's earned silently, grown in patience, proven in results. You can't fake it. You can't borrow it. You can't manufacture it overnight. And they, desperate to measure, to define, to reduce, never saw it coming. They never noticed because they were too busy looking for cracks, too busy hoping for weakness, too busy believing that your voice had to be louder than it ever needed to be. Now the tables have turned. Their confidence is shaky. Their laughter has faded. Their jokes have no bite. Every glance at you carries a pang of recognition they'd never admit aloud. You weren't loud. You weren't brash. You weren't begging for approval. You just were. And that's the cruelest part for them. They can't argue it. They can't deny it. They can only watch as the reality of your power, your presence, your influence, grows in the quiet, relentless way that dominance always does. They underestimated you, and now they are trapped in the consequences of their own misjudgment. Everything they counted against you, every doubt, every smirk, every whispered conversation, is meaningless in the face of what you've built, in the face of who you've become, in the face of a presence they can neither ignore nor control. And watching them squirm, knowing they thought they held the advantage, is a revelation that doesn't need celebration, doesn't need applause, doesn't need explanation, because power, true power, announces itself without words, and they are finally seeing it for what it is,